We are live, I believe. This Hangout on here is live. I'm going to refresh my page here. All right. Okay. So we can see everything.
Okay, here we go.
Perfect.
See live now. I'm going to have to mute this, obviously, but...
Yeah, I muted it too. So make sure
yeah, okay. The echo is awful, but yeah, I definitely have to mute that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, cool. So I can see you and I can see me, and I think the audio is definitely fine, so let's do this.
Yeah. So to any viewers that might eventually join us, welcome to this broadcast. The name of this collaboration will probably be called the AmeriTaiNadian podcast.
I love that name.
Right. I'm glad you do, because I don't know.
It took time to grow on me. At first, I was like, "Oh, good God!" But then, it took some time. I feel better about it now.
Right. So my name's Daniel, and throughout this series, you'll get to know both of us better. But if you like to see the introduction that I gave, please feel welcome to go to American in Taiwan, which is Brian's YouTube channel here, and check out our first episode, if you will. Very briefly, I discovered Brian's YouTube channel on YouTube, looking up the thoughts of the aftermath of the midterm elections in Taiwan, and I came across Brian's channel. So welcome, Brian, and why don't you give a little introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So just very briefly, I came to Taiwan from the United States in 2012, and I started my YouTube channel in late 2012, and I've been living here ever since. So I've been vlogging or vlogging about history and politics and food and culture and travel, and basically anything you can think of that is Taiwan related, because I wanted to share my life with my family and friends, but also share all of that stuff with the wider world too. And I feel like now at this point, I'm almost desperate to share Taiwan's story with the world, because I feel personally that Taiwan is under threat. So I kind of want to help Taiwan's story get out to the world and kind of boost up that soft power, which is, I think, is part of what we're going to talk about later. So yeah, I'll throw it back to Daniel.
Absolutely. And I guess if we were to introduce our stances on the political situation here. Well, before we even go to that, what I guess you came from California. You were born and raised there.
Yeah. Well, I wasn't born in California, but I was raised in California, and that's where I lived the majority of my life. But yeah.
What if you don't mind me asking, what state were you originally from?
Yeah, no worries. I was actually born on the East Coast in a little, well, not little, but in a city called Alexandria, Virginia, which is just outside of Washington, D.C.
And Washington D.C. is the state, right?
No, Washington, D.C. is the District of Columbia. It's actually not a state.
District of Columbia. Oh, the state of Columbia?
No, it's a district. It's a separate political entity. It's complicated.
Right.
Don't worry about it.
That's the capital, right?
That's right.
And what state would that belong in?
Well, because of the way the United States is set up, actually, Washington, D.C. is not in any state. It's in its own entity. It's in the District of Columbia.
Oh, okay. So is it like within?
Because they don't want any state to have too much power like that, right? It seems terribly unfair. So what they did was they made this thing called DC. Gotcha. And yeah, it's its own thing.
I'm just revealing how little I know about American geography here. But so is it like between three states or something like that? Like
I
bordering.
think it's probably, oh God, I should know this, but I think it's probably completely surrounded by Virginia, and if not, then it might share a border with Maryland.
Okay.
So,
Okay. Gotcha. Gotcha. Yeah. No. This just
okay.
brief information. What? So, can you tell me a little bit about the first time you've heard of the name Taiwan when you were in the States and how that came to be? And
Oh gosh. Yeah, I can't even really remember when the first time I ever heard about it, but my knowledge was never really that deep or intense when I was in America. Like, it was very, very shallow. Like, if you asked me to talk about Taiwan when I was like a high school student, I could probably give you a 5 sentence paragraph.
Mhm.
I basically knew nothing about it other than that there was this girl in my class and I liked her and I thought she was, I thought she was something special.
Right.
And she was originally from Taiwan, or her parents were at least. And yeah, that's about it.
Was that what actually prompted you to do a little research
No,
on it?
no,
Or
not at
okay.
all, not at all.
Okay.
Like, okay, so like I had a thing for her,
Right.
right? And so I just knew the name Taiwan and like a few tiny little facts about it, just from that interaction, right?
Mhm.
Years later, after I had graduated high school and gone to university and graduated from university and done my TOEFL certificate to get trained up to teach English abroad, then I started doing light research on Taiwan,
Okay.
right? And then I did an interview via the internet with a company here in Taiwan, and that's how I moved to Taiwan.
Okay. And what made you want to do that?
Yeah, so there was a few choices, right? In my mind, at least. There was Japan and South Korea and mainland China and then Taiwan. And then so I start going through the list, right? So what's good and what's bad? So Japan and Korea seem to have difficult visa rules and requirements, and it seemed to take a long time. I didn't like that. And China, China glaringly lacks any kind of freedom, any kind of freedom of speech or freedom of what I would call freedom of communication. Because telling you can't say certain words, you can't use a multitude of services. So you can't possibly even communicate with somebody outside of China unless you use a VPN.
Right.
Because they block Google, they block Yahoo, they block Facebook, they block everything, you
Right.
know? So I didn't want that. I didn't want to be closed off from the entire world
Yeah.
and live in an authoritarian police state. That's not my cup of tea,
Right.
okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
I it sounds cheesy, but I value freedom, I value liberty, and I wanted to live in a country that reflects that, that agrees with that. And Taiwan is a freedom-loving country, despite what some people preach. So yeah, here I am.
Sorry. What was that last part?
I just said Taiwan is a freedom-loving country,
Okay.
despite what some people say,
Right.
and that's why I'm here.
Right. And we'll definitely go into the details because you told me a little bit about this law that I was just bewildered that Taiwan had as well. But we can go into that a little later. So I guess would you say you wanted to go overseas? I guess life experience aside, was it with the purpose of teaching English or?
Yeah, it was almost entirely about getting a job. You have to. I'm not from a rich family, so you have to make your own way, right? You have to make money. You have to do that to survive. And so at that time, the economy in the U.S. was not good. I would argue it's still not good for certain people. And so I decided there was better chance if I left the United States and went abroad. And also, always wanted to leave the United States and see the world and have an adventure. And yeah.
Okay, so it was actually that's something I didn't know. So you thought that the American economy was I guess lacking or on a decline, and you wanted that was part of this decision into
Oh yeah,
okay,
certainly,
interesting, interesting. I didn't.
certainly. So just to put it into context, like I believe that the global financial meltdown happened in 2008.
Hmm.
So that would have been like me in my, first or second year of university. So things were not looking good. I mean, it was all melting down around me as
Right,
I was getting my education. And even when I was done with that and I had my degree, things still weren't looking good,
right.
you know.
May I ask what your degree was in?
Yeah, I got a bachelor's degree in history.
Oh, okay, okay. I can see that because you did a little video on a brief history on Taiwan that really caught my attention.
Yeah, yeah, it's one of my it's not perfect. I don't think any of my videos are perfect. I'm quite hard on myself, but that is one of my favorites.
But
So,
yeah, well, it was mine too, so don't worry. I was
yeah, thank you.
in fact, that was the video that I commented on that made me wanted to do a collaboration with you. Was it that one I think or
Maybe, or
yeah.
maybe like you said, maybe it was the politics.
Right, right, right. Okay, yeah. So immediately, what I guess you came to Taiwan in 2012 by yourself,
Alone, completely alone.
and what were your initial culture shocks that you've experienced that you remember?
Wow. Well, just about everything you can think of, from language and communication to the food to the way cities are set up to the way people drive. I mean, anything you can think of.
Yeah,
it's
well,
it's as different as can be.
right, and we've talked about the differences in how people drive in
Oh
Western
yeah.
countries.
Oh, good
And,
Lord, it's
well,
not good.
yeah, we'll definitely go into that too.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So I guess how was it going from you know first time being in Taiwan to finding a place to live and getting your own setup going and finding a job?
Yeah, well, it certainly was not easy. And if people really want to know the full deep story, then there's a video I made on my channel basically called, I think it's titled My Story or My Life, and then subtitled like How I Ended Up Here in Taiwan.
Hmm.
And so they can check that out. But just to give like a brief kind of a thing, it was not easy for me when I first got here. It was incredibly hard because those people that I interviewed with first, that all fell through. And so I got here and I got through part of their training and it just didn't work out. And all of a sudden I was in a foreign land with money that was running out
Yeah,
and no job and no promise of a job and nothing.
yeah,
So it was a major challenge going from that to where I am now. I
right.
didn't get to where I am now with a stable home and a family and two children and a job
Jeez.
without a major struggle. It's
Right.
not easy.
Did you I guess you met your wife after you came to Taiwan?
Yeah, yeah. I met her probably um, maybe 9 to 10 months into my time here.
Okay, okay, okay. And I guess that would have been your first time dating maybe even an Asian person? Is that
No, there was one girl before her, one also Taiwanese girl from here
o
before her, and
okay.
we got kind of what can I say? We burned bright and things were intense, but it fizzled out real quick.
Okay,
It
okay.
just didn't work out.
Right,
She had her ideas about what she wanted to have in a relationship, and I had my ideas, and it just wasn't going to work out.
right.
So we parted ways.
And okay, so I guess what were some of the cultural shocks or differences that you can share with us? Being an American born and raised, with somebody that was born and raised in Taiwan?
Yeah, I guess socially, probably it'd be a good start there. Is that Taiwan is, to put it in a nutshell, is a collectivist society based off of Confucianism.
Hmm.
I think that would be fair to say.
Right.
Whereas the West is very individualistic and all about like personal freedom,
Hmm.
and that's incredibly different. And that colors how people interact with each other in the way people behave. And also, I'd have to throw in face culture. So if you
Uh,
don't, maybe you can talk about face culture.
do you mean saving face, that kind of face?
Yeah, well, just the way that face influences you and kind of forces you to behave.
Right. Well, it's actually interesting to me. I mean, I was born and raised in Canada, and you've actually spent an exponentially longer time in Taiwan than I have. But I was raised born and raised with Taiwanese parents who was born and raised in Taiwan, so I understand that culture. Even though I was born and raised here, um, it came uh, as a bit of a shock to me when I learned that there is a culture of in Mandarin we'd say it's like to give somebody else a stage to step down. Do you know what I'm kind of getting at?
Kind of, yeah, kind
Okay.
of.
So it
It's
basically
not phrased that way in English, but I kind of get
no,
what you
no,
mean.
no. Yeah, I was literally
I'm
translating
I'm
literally.
I'm I'm thinking in my head, and I can kind of get the concept.
Yeah. So it basically means there's a culture of even considering if there's somebody in front of you that you know or you don't know who might be losing face. There's a culture of about giving them a pathway to save face. Whereas I feel like in the West, if somebody that even a best friend, if he said something stupid or he's humiliated in whatever way, it's kind of like, oh, that's kind of funny. Oh, I'll try to help you, but it's not as much of a social. This is what you kind of. There's no social construct of we have to give him a pathway to save face.
Yeah, there's no
Like,
pressure to do that,
yeah.
you know.
So having stated those differences, how does do you I guess notice that you must have noticed that in your dating life as well, because that's much
Uh,
more intimate.
Dating though, not really. I mean, when you're alone with someone, you can kind of be yourself, or you should be able to be yourself,
Hmm.
if the relationship is a healthy one.
Hmm.
But like I guess if you were out with your girlfriend or boyfriend and you were interacting with other people, maybe that would come into play. But if it's just the two of you, I don't think so. That shouldn't be like that. Like I said, you should be able to be yourself.
Hmm. Okay, so would you say it was relatively, I would never say easy, but were there any cultural differences, for example, between you dating an American in America versus you dating a Taiwanese in Taiwan?
Yeah, I would probably say that with dating, that things probably move a lot faster here in
Mm.
Taiwan, and
Okay.
the girl expects you to be a lot more serious about it here.
Okay.
Like I think girls here are a lot less likely to be into just hanging out and kind of taking it easy and
Right.
just screwing around. Like
Right.
they want a path, a clear path. Like we date and things go well, and then you meet my parents, and then we get married.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a nice observation. I can definitely see. Yeah, in the West, there's a lot. Even it's not even just the males. Even the girls, they want to take their time and date and experience many people with.
Yeah, in the West, we kind of want to hang out and have
Right.
fun and just screw around, and it's
Yeah.
just not. It's a lot more serious here, I think.
And how do you feel about that?
I mean, I don't know. There is no feeling. It's neutral. It just is what it is. That's how people behave here. That's how they want to live. So that's what they do, you
Mhm.
know.
And you were obviously cool with that because now you're married with two
Well,
kids.
if I wasn't, then I wouldn't have participated, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so don't worry. Well, we can move on from your personal life. There, I felt like I was getting
No,
a little too.
no. Hey, it's fine. Like,
No,
if I wasn't happy to share my life, I wouldn't have a YouTube channel.
right,
So,
right. So we got discussing politics a little bit, and like I said before, I discovered you from your video about your thoughts on the results of the midterm elections in Taiwan. How would you describe the political climate in Taiwan right now?
yeah, well, hey, for starters, just so everybody knows, I'm probably one of the few people in the world calling it the Taiwanese midterm election.
Oh,
That's
okay.
not that's not actually what it's called.
Right, right.
I think they're called the 9-in-1 elections,
Okay.
but anyhow,
I've actually heard somebody else refer it that way. Not they didn't call it that per se, but they kind of referred it to it like that so Americans can understand.
yeah, right. It makes it easier. So okay, I'm not the only weirdo,
Yeah.
but so basically, my take on the current situation in Taiwan politically would be the following. In the past, well, okay, so let's go back to 2012. So when I got here, the KMT, that's the Kuomintang, that's the Chinese Nationalist Party, was in power, and the president was Ma Ying-jeou, and so he went through his term, and then partly through his term, there was this what I would call a civil revolt, right, called the Sunflower Student Movement, where basically there was an uprising, if you will, civilly. There wasn't any violence, with guns and tanks, right? But people revolted against his government and they occupied the legislature here. And that was near the end of his time in office. And that kind of ushered in the DPP. That's the green side of politics here. That's the Democratic Progressive Party. And they came to power in their midterm back then. They won a majority of the seats in like mayors and in townships and in counties and stuff. And then President Taiwan was elected in 2016. And now we're making our way through that. And we just had the midterm. And she has suffered a major defeat in this last Taiwanese midterm election. The KMT has come back with a vengeance. And it looks like from this point on that things are only going to get more blue. They are only going to move more into the direction of what I would call pro-China politics and pro-unification politics,
Mm.
which is, in my opinion, deeply, deeply troubling and really scary.
So, how do you think we got from with Taiwan, where we went from a blue Taiwan, a KMT Taiwan, to like you said, having a civil revolt and going to a green Taiwan, and now what do you think the I guess the desire to go back to blue comes from?
Yeah, I think it mostly overwhelmingly comes from economic angst.
Mm,
Okay. So, similarly to the United States, I believe that one of the major factors in the election of Donald Trump to the American presidency was that so many people were so pissed off with the political establishment and they were so fed up and they felt like our lives economically were not getting better and we're never going to get better. So we just got to try something crazy
mm,
and go with this madman, right? And
right.
I feel that relates to Taiwan because the economy here has been stagnating for a long time. It's not been really booming for a very long time. That's true for Ma Ying-jeou when I first got here. That's true for Taiwan, and that's going to be true for whoever comes next, I believe.
Hmm.
And people are fed up, and they want the economy to boom again. They want to be able to buy houses. They want to be able to take vacations. They want to be able to live, decently.
Yeah.
And they're just not able to. Well, young people, right, are not able to, for the most part, to be able to do that. And a lot of them are forced to move abroad. There's this thing called the brain drain here, where all of the smart, young, talented Taiwanese don't see a good future here in terms of getting a job and buying a house and all that stuff. And so they move abroad, right? All of Taiwan's best people give up and they leave.
Hmm.
And I think that's where that comes from. And I think that's why we're seeing the KMT come back with a vengeance.
Right. Did you know that there's actually a Taiwanese American running for president in America for 2020?
Yeah, is that Andrew Yang?
Yeah, that's him. And
Yeah, I like him a lot. I
yeah,
think he's wild. The way he speaks is incredible, in my opinion. But I like him. I do.
that's because when you were talking about how the reason why you thought Trump won in 2016 was the economy, that's exactly what he's saying too. It's not, it's not, it's not helpful to call Trump voters, call them names, racist, or whatever it is you want
Yeah,
to call it.
just to chime in.
Yeah,
Look, are some of them racist?
yeah,
Yeah, certainly they are.
yeah,
For no doubt about it. But are the majority of them racist? No way. That's
yeah,
a simplification, and you're not looking at the core issue.
yeah. I mean, what was it? I remember, I can only remember like Clinton won the popular vote by like 2 million, but like the what was the total number of Trump voters? It was like what, 20 million or something like that?
A
Was it?
lot, a lot,
And
a good chunk of the country. You can't
yeah,
disregard that.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Andrew Yang, this is what he talks about, and he's he basically just repeated a lot of what you just said about the economy stagnating, and people don't see a future for themselves in the current state of affairs, and so he's introducing UBI, but that's a whole whole
Yeah, let's.
whole
I mean, that's very, very interesting, no doubt. But that's probably for another live stream,
absolutely,
right?
absolutely. Um, Yeah, so economy. So yeah, I remember actually when you talked about how, because it's interesting. I feel like as opposed to America, where people can identify with either being an America a Republican or Democrat, they can identify that for, I don't know, 5, 10 years or a majority of their lives. But correct me if I'm wrong. There's a difference between uh, how people do that in America and Taiwan, where people in Taiwan, if they just see something that isn't working, they'll easily vote for the other party. Do you agree with that?
Um, yes and no. I mean, there's a lot of people in America too who do not have very clearly defined political identities,
Hmm.
and they're just as likely to flip if
Okay.
they feel that someone is not speaking to them,
Hmm.
you know. And it's also the same that in America we have people who are very heavily entrenched in their ideas, and it's almost a part of their identity, right?
Right.
Like you would say, I'm a Polish American and I'm a Republican, damn it, right? Like they go together, right?
Hmm.
It's like part of you.
Right.
There's a lot of people like that here in Taiwan as well.
Right.
My wife and her family are deep green,
Hmm.
and they always have been, and they probably always will be.
Right. Right. Yeah. Now that I said that out loud, I realized how dumb that.
No, that's fine. Maybe some people don't understand that, and maybe
Yeah.
it was different. But just to
Yeah.
clarify that, that's fine.
Yeah, because the reason why I asked was because you talked about how, when you first arrived in Taiwan, it was a blue government, and then there was a huge a flip into green, and now you're talking about how it's
It's
flipping
flipped
back
again.
again. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I guess one thing that my dad did tell me about is when Taiwan came into office, one of the things that she did was, I think it was she publicly declared that they were pro independence or whatever it was that she said, and China didn't react very well to that. So what China did was restrict tourism from Chinese people going into Taiwan, and what that resulted in was there was before all this happened, there was plenty of Chinese people going to Taiwan for on vacation, and the tourism industry in Taiwan was doing really well. And after China severed that line, a lot of people uh, went out of business. Not they went from a place where, oh well, I can see our industry doing very well. I'm going to invest some money into buying extra properties for a second hotel that I'm going to invest in a second hotel because I can see this continuing on. And then after China did that, there was a huge drop in tourism, and their investment ended up being them going bankrupt. And I actually heard my dad tell me that there was a couple people like that committed suicide because they went from
Yeah, sorry, if I can
please yeah.
just jump in really quickly. So you're right. Everything you're saying is correct, right? And the reason it is because China uses this soft power that they have as a weapon.
Mm-hmm.
They use tourism and the money that comes from that industry as a weapon to influence Taiwan.
Yeah.
And so because Taiwan decided to move in a green political direction, they cut tourism. Purposely, the government cut tourism of people traveling from China to Taiwan for vacation and holiday. They cut that on purpose to punish Taiwan. It was a punishment, a very clear punishment. And now that certain areas here in Taiwan, for example, Kaohsiung and Taichung, are moving towards the blue side, right? They've elected blue mayors. Now Taiwan is going to direct tourists to go back to those cities specifically to reward those areas and those politicians.
You mean China?
Carrot, it's a carrot and a stick approach, you know?
You mean China, right?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Yeah, sorry if I spoke incorrectly.
Yeah.
China is going to send people to those areas to reward them. And back when Taiwan was moving green, they were taking tourists away to punish them.
Right.
It's a weapon. They use it as a weapon, a soft power weapon, right?
And I actually didn't know that was a term until you brought it up, I think, last week. So basically, for those that listening that don't know, soft power basically is any influence that isn't militant, using force, right? Would that be?
Yeah, if I can just quote briefly, I think
Sure.
this kind of sums it up in a really good way, okay? So soft power is the ability to shape the preferences of others through appeal and attraction. And so a defining feature of soft power is that it is non-coercive, so it is not military, right? It is not hard power.
Right.
And the currency of soft power is culture, political values, foreign policies, those things.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of reminds me of a scene in I hope you don't mind me using this reference, but Fast and Furious 5. I don't know if you know, well, you probably have no idea where I'm going with this, but so I'll just keep going. There was a scene where the antagonist, the enemy, it was a Portuguese or Brazilian mob boss that had control over the favelas. I think they call it, is basically, I guess, another word for district, maybe a poor district.
It's a Brazilian ghetto.
Right.
More realistic.
And there was a scene where he was describing how, the Spaniards came to South America or Mexico, whatever it is, and they basically used hard power, you could say, right, with militant force. And he's being all sly, and he says, I prefer the methods of the Portuguese. What the Portuguese did was they came here bearing fruits and baskets and clothing and gifts and trinkets. They gave they were friendly, and whenever the Portuguese wanted something, they would basically just threaten to remove a lot of the materials and resources that the Aboriginal people have become dependent on. So I guess that's
Yeah, that's exactly it. You're
yeah,
not using, tanks and guns. You're using diplomacy, right?
yeah, freaky, eh?
Well, no, it makes sense. You catch more bees with honey than vinegar, right?
Yeah, that's a good. Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, yeah. So yeah, I mean, do you what's sort of your attitude moving forward from, I guess you mentioned it being a little concerning that it's moving towards the blue party. I guess what could you briefly explain why you're not that much in favor of the blue party?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
Just
if that's even a right way to phrase your position, would you even?
no, it's correct. That's correct. That's definitely correct.
Mm,
So just to elaborate on that, the major concern with the pan-blue side of politics coming to power here in Taiwan is that we are going to move in the direction of unification with the People's Republic of China. And if you value freedom and liberty and being able to control your own life, then you don't want that to happen. And basically, the deal that I see mainland China floating for Taiwan is something called one country, two systems, which is basically what China did with Hong Kong and Macau. After they were surrendered from European control back to Chinese control, they were offered this system called one country, two systems, where that they're able to keep their politics and their way of doing things that way, but they're ultimately under Chinese control. So in Hong Kong, you could have freedom of speech, you could have freedom of the press, and you could get on Facebook and Google and all that, but you're ultimately under Chinese control, right? And that doesn't sound too bad, but you need to look at what's happened to Hong Kong since the 1990s and the handover. Is that all those things that they promised Hong Kong, they've reneged on all those promises, right? They've
What are
broken all the promises.
what are some examples?
They promised them democracy,
Hmm.
and then they broke the promise.
Hmm.
They said you can vote and you can choose your own candidates to run in the elections, and they broke that promise. And it was so angering and so upsetting to the people of Hong Kong that they revolted. And it was a lot less civil than the revolt was here in Taiwan. If you don't know, and if the viewers don't know, they can research what's called the umbrella movement. And that got violent, that got intensely violent in Hong Kong. The Hong Kong people, like I said, they revolted against the police who were, doing what they were doing on the orders of the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. And that's not what I want for Taiwan, because believe me, if we also take this deal of one country, two systems, and Taiwan decides to be a special administrative region of China, that they're going to treat us the same. Just like they did to the people of Hong Kong and Macau, they're going to break the promises and they're going to take away our freedom.
Hmm.
There's nothing that separates us, from them. They'll treat us exactly the same. There's nothing that makes it so that we can get away with it.
Right. And I guess my immediate reaction to that, do you think that there is an advantage to having Taiwan being separated by that strait? Is there any
You mean
protection?
a geographical advantage
Yeah, I mean
or like a national security advantage?
that, and do you think that kind of has? I'm just thinking out loud here. What with Hong Kong and China, they're a lot closer to each other than Taiwan is to China. I think they can just
They
cross.
literally share a land border.
Yeah, I think yeah, it's separated by like a really small river, right?
In the case of Hong Kong and both Macau, they literally share a land border.
Right, right. So I think it's much easier for the Chinese to
Roll a tank over the
employ.
border.
Yeah. So So do you think that the fact that Taiwan is a little farther has any advantage there?
Yeah, definitely. Look, it probably true to say that if it was not for the Strait of Taiwan, right, if it wasn't for that body of water between us,
Hmm.
that we probably would not exist the way we do now.
Yeah, I think I don't even need to think about it. I would buy that immediately.
It's very straightforward.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm looking at the map right now and yeah, there's no I do not envy them.
Although I will mention this, the island of Jinmen
Hmm.
that Taiwan controls, which is just off the coast of China,
Okay.
you can literally see it just off the coast of China with your bare naked eyes, was successfully defended from a PLA invasion back in the late 40s, early 50s. And that is why
Yes.
Taiwan was actually never invaded by the PLA, or they never even attempted it, right? So they did successfully hold that territory close to China at that time. But nowadays, obviously, the story would be much different.
We're talking about the Kinmen Islands?
Jinmen,
Right, that's how you
the
say it.
Golden Door, right?
And yeah, I'm looking at that island and it's very close to China. Much farther.
Like I said, I have been to that island. I have stood on the beach, and you can literally see Xiamen.
Okay, you're right. Yeah, that's so is are these islands under Taiwanese control?
Yes, yes. So what people
Wow.
might not understand is that the political entity or country of Taiwan does not just include Taiwan.
Right.
It also includes three major outlying island areas. So those would include the Penghu Islands, which are in the middle of the strait.
Right.
And then closer to China, like literally just off their coast, you would have Matsu in the north. And then in the south, you would have Jinmen.
Let's see. How do you spell that first one?
Well, in the romanization, it would be Matsu.
TSU. Oh, okay, yeah.
Are you
Wow.
saying it?
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
not what it's called in Chinese. It's like Lianjiang or something like that.
Okay. Yeah. I it surprises me that so both of these islands, the Matsu and the Jingmen, are under Taiwanese control.
Yes,
Well, that actually surprises me
that's
because
correct. The PLA was not successful in invading and taking them over, and Taiwan has held on to them since the late 40s, early 50s.
that impresses me actually because just looking at the map and how close it is. If you zoom out further enough, and it 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 looks like it's just not even an island, it's just off the coast of China. So
Yeah, yeah, they're right there. You can literally wave to people on the other side.
wow.
Yeah.
So would you give credit to because now that China is much more stronger militarily than China, would you give them any props to not just going ahead and just like taking over?
Um, I, I don't know what do you mean? Like, give them props for restraining themselves now in 2019 for not invading?
Yeah, kind of. I mean, I'm just
I mean,
it's
it's hard for me to give you props on that
yeah,
because the reason you're doing that is not because you're a nice guy.
yeah.
The reason you're not invading is because you don't want to risk a nuclear war.
Between the US and China?
So here's the main reason that Taiwan hasn't been annexed already
Mhm.
is because there is a legal agreement between Taiwan and the United States saying that the United States will not tolerate any attempt to resolve this Taiwan issue using force. So if either side tries to use force to change the situation here, America will not abide by that, and we will militarily intervene and stop that.
Interesting. I have heard. Was this in the 50s?
So around the time of Richard Nixon, do you know who Nixon was?
Yeah.
Okay, so Richard Nixon began opening up to mainland China, and that got the process started. And eventually, America broke off formal diplomatic relations with Taiwan, the Republic of China, and switched to Beijing and the People's Republic of China.
Mhm.
And after they did that, and they broke off formal relations, and they recognized the PRC, they had to reassure Taiwan because it was kind of a betrayal of their old ally
Right.
who had fought with them and had assisted them in Korea and in Vietnam. So they had to kind of reassure them, like, look, we're switching official recognition, but we're not going to like leave you out to dry, right? We're not going to hang you out to dry.
Mhm.
We're going to back you up. Like, we're not just going to let them invade, right? If they try anything, we'll be there with our ships and our aircraft carriers, and we'll defend you.
How do you view that decision by Nixon?
Um, I mean, he's a son of a bitch. I mean, what do you want me to say?
Yeah.
If I could travel back in time, I'd punch him in the face.
Right. Yeah, because what my
I mean, even Jimmy Carter, who I actually quite like,
mhm.
I would have to have a very serious like argument with him as to why he let all that happen.
Is he the vice president at the time or
No, well, I mean, like I said, Nixon got the party started, but I think it finished under Carter.
right? Okay. Oh yeah, he's still alive. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, he's a good guy. I really like him, but and on just on this one particular issue, I'm really like we would have to have a big argument about that.
Why do you think they did that?
Well, we spoke privately, and I'll just repeat it again. I think two reasons. I think at the time we were deep in the Cold War, and we wanted to encircle the USSR, that's the Soviet Union.
Mhm.
And since the USSR and the PRC were on very unfriendly terms, they were practically enemies. Making friends with the enemy of your enemy is a smart thing to do.
Mhm.
And also, I think in the long run, a lot of capitalists saw that as a great business opportunity. And I think that makes sense considering that China is now the factory of the world.
Yeah, because what my dad told me, and I think another Taiwanese friend of mine that's 10 years my senior, they talked about how 1949, when you read online or in your textbooks or whatever it is, they'll tell you that the Chinese Civil War ended in 1949, but the mentality is not like that's not how it was back then. It's 1949, and maybe there was a formal ceasefire or whatever, or maybe even not. I'd have to read up on that. But the mentality, even going into the early 50s, was at any time we could still be fighting with, between the KMT in Taiwan and the PRC in China. So what my dad and my Taiwanese friend told me, what a lot of these people who the Taiwanese people who know this history, they really think that at the time in the early 50s, the KMT still had a chance to fight the communists in China and possibly win. And so they're really frustrated that the US had this formal
See, if I can intervene,
Yeah, please,
I have
please.
to take issue with that view.
Okay.
I think that they may have thought that, but I think that's an incorrect thought to have.
Well, which part?
Um, well, the notion that the KMT ever could have possibly retaken the mainland is just absurd,
Okay.
to be honest.
Okay. Yeah, well, I'd love to get that guy over here, and because
Well, I mean, we don't need to fight and
no,
argue it
no,
out.
no,
Like, we can just have a civil conversation. But
absolutely.
just my primary example as to why that wouldn't work is that they actually tried that.
Mhm.
The KMT, along with the American CIA, had soldiers, nationalist soldiers, hiding out in Burma, and they were doing guerrilla hit and run attacks on the PRC after the KMT had fled to Taiwan. and it didn't work.
Okay. So I guess, and I have no idea what. Well, I think he only sent me a video, but I think. Oh, okay. So Burma's on the other side of China.
Yeah,
Just
by the way, I have a really I have a video speaking about these troops that were hiding out in Burma.
please send it to me after we're done.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. So if people want to go on my channel and check that out, I believe it is titled something along the lines of Little Burma or Taipei's Little Burma.
Okay.
So people can check that out if they want to, and they'll get a lot more background on those troops and the American involvement with the CIA and why it failed and what happened to those people afterwards.
Okay. Absolutely. I'll look into that. Yeah, I think, and you'll disagree, but I think if I this was at least half a year ago, but I think he just sent me a video, um, talking about how the weapons that the KMT had at the time, with the help of the United States, they might have been able to overthrow the PRC. But putting that aside,
You should definitely invite him on.
yeah, okay, sure,
we can go into this in detail.
okay. So accepting that they couldn't have, what, the PRC having been, also being enemies with the USSR, and the US wanting to use that against the USSR, but you also being, a fan of Taiwan's, how would you have moved forward with that? As, say, you were Nixon.
Oh, so like if Brian was Richard Nixon. Okay, well, I mean,
we're in the
obviously,
50s in this
yeah,
scenario.
we're a long while back.
Yeah.
But actually, if I'm Nixon, then I'm in the 60s and 70s. But
Okay.
so it's not an easy question, right? It's not like I have all the answers,
Right.
but I certainly would not have just abandoned Taiwan the way that the United States seemingly did. I might have tried to simultaneously recognize the PRC and set up relations with China officially, and at the same time, maybe trying to get, Taiwan, the ROC, to get its own seat at the UN, maybe the way that North and South Korea kind of both have recognition in the world.
Right.
Right? Maybe could have tried that, or maybe I could have said, like, if you just officially change your name from the Republic of China to Taiwan, then maybe you can join the UN in that way as an independent nation, separate from China. And they might not like that, but at the time, there's nothing they can do about that.
Right.
So I don't really look. I'm not clear, but
Right.
I certainly wouldn't have done it exactly the way he did it.
That's a very good point you brought up, because you're right. If at the time they were still, before they decided to recognize the PRC, at the time they were still allied with the KMT, and so I obviously, we're in 2019, so it's it's easy to judge in hindsight, but you're right. They could have talked to PRC and went like, look, we're already allies with the KMT, but we have a common enemy. I'll recognize you both, and let's just work together from, going forward. Because if we had, for example, North and South Korea, for example, if China was called, East China and West China, East China being mainland China and West China, or West China being the PRC, and then East China being Taiwan, it'd be so much easier to explain to people what the situation is, rather, like, as opposed to how things are now, when I have to try to explain to people who
Yeah, we're
know
in such a
nothing.
legal gray area. It's really
Yeah.
hard to explain to outsiders.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think we actually are going into an hour now, so maybe we can, we definitely covered a wide variety of topics, so maybe we can end it here today and move, next time we'll go on your channel. And
Yeah, if we can, then can we just have a few more minutes then?
absolutely, if anything you want to wrap up.
Yeah, I just wanted to maybe throw a few more things in there. So I think Like part of like what I said, part of what my mission is, I think, going forward is, you know, building my channel, obviously, but also, you know, I want to promote and kind of help Taiwan on its soft power and try to, you know, boost it that way. And so I think maybe, you know, we're probably not going to be able to get into it this time.
Mhm.
But yeah, just briefly, there's a lot of great movies out there, Taiwanese movies. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of music and other stuff out there. And I would encourage all you guys to check that out. And I actually have two things sitting next to me here that I can show off. They're not the perfect example of Taiwanese culture, but they're things that I like, and
Please.
maybe you'll like them too.
Okay.
So first one is a musical thing, and I probably mentioned this a long time ago on my channel. After I went to the Spring Scream Music Festival here in the south of Taiwan, I picked up this CD. So
The ever so sorry. Let me just take a look here.
the Ever So Friendlies.
Okay. Are they an Aboriginal Taiwanese?
And so this is a foreigner band, but they
Okay.
started here in Taiwan and they're based here out of Taiwan, central
Okay.
Taiwan.
Where did they come from?
I think from a couple of different places. I think England, probably Canada, the United States, that combo.
Okay.
So
So
they're good guys. There's good music coming out of here. So, you know, do your research. You'll find something that you like. Obviously, most of it's not going to be in English like this,
yeah.
but there are other things, right? There you'll find something you like, okay? And you can chime in if you know any good music.
Oh well.
Is there anything
I
you like particularly, or?
I mean, I grew up listening to pretty much whatever the other older Taiwanese people were listening to. So, like my sister, for example, there was Tank. I don't know if you know who Tank is.
I think I've heard that briefly. I don't really
Yeah,
know too
he's
much.
not that famous anymore because he had a condition with his heart, so he doesn't sing as much. But he was, I think he's either full or half Aboriginal Taiwanese, so that was kind of special about him. And obviously, there's the old Jay Chow music, and I guess somebody who's slightly more current might be Xiao Jingten. I don't know if you've heard of him.
I'm sure my wife is all over that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I guess one of my well, there's a couple Taiwanese movies, and we'll maybe go into more.
Oh yeah. Oh hey, pause,
Please,
pause.
please.
That's also so music. Just I will briefly mention the music. So
Yeah.
everyone, please check out the music. That's a big part of soft power. But also movies, like Daniel has mentioned. Recently, we both bonded over what I consider to be an awesome movie, and here it is. So you guys check
Oh
this out.
wow, you have it hard
This is
copy.
the Sede Kabale. This is the Warriors of the Rainbow box set. 2 DVDs in one box right
Yeah.
here. And so this is basically what I would call the Taiwanese Aboriginal Braveheart movie.
Taiwanese Aboriginal Braveheart. I actually haven't seen Braveheart, so I'll
What?
trust you.
Okay,
Yeah,
I mean, you
I'll
need to.
I'll, I'll get on that. I'll get on that.
That's classic. Okay.
That's
Anyway,
yeah. That's what I was gonna ask you next. Like, what, how would you reference an American movie to introduce what this
yeah.
is? Yeah,
Well, this is badass. I mean,
yeah,
just look at this right here.
yeah.
See this right
Okay,
here? See this guy?
yeah,
This dude's a warrior.
yeah,
This dude's a warrior too. I mean, it's just badass.
yeah. Um,
So everyone, please check that out. And actually, maybe next time, you can't do it this time, but maybe next time Daniel can get that dagger, that Aboriginal
oh
dagger,
yeah, I do have it.
and
Yeah,
show that off
yeah,
because
yeah,
I
yeah.
think that would be wicked cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Um, Anything else you'd like to wrap up before we go?
Yeah, people, please, you know, get as deep as you can, right? Get into the music, get into the movies. These are just a couple of my personal suggestions. I have plenty more when it comes to music and movies and all that. We'll talk about that more, but yeah, learn as much as you can. And if you love Taiwan, then you need to now promote it more than ever, right? We need to get Taiwan's name and story out there more than ever.
Mhm.
You know, please share Taiwan with the world. More
Right,
people need to know about it.
right. And we'll please visit Brian's channel called American in Taiwan on YouTube. He also has an Instagram and Facebook page by the same name. And next episode, we'll be doing this on his channel, and we will be going into the specific examples of soft power, why that's necessary, and exploring that a little further. So thank you everybody for tuning in. And
Yeah, definitely. Hey guys, just also please, if you want to, I highly recommend you pop over to my channel, and you can catch actually the first podcast we did.
Right.
This is actually podcast number 2.
Right.
So please check that out.
All right. And we'll see you next time.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.